Hey you guys, it's Miss Clements again. We're back with lesson number 7. So today we're going to be talking about World War II and the Great Depression, specifically in Texas. So last time you should have completed the World War II web quest, just to give you a really good overview and the events of World War II specifically, maybe not necessarily only in Texas, but just as a whole, both in the United States and globally. Now that you have that background knowledge, I just want to kind of tie both the Great Depression that we learned earlier in this unit and then also what you learned yesterday in the web quest. So if you notice, you have this PowerPoint here, and I'm going to actually walk you through this one because there's a lot of information here, and I just want to make sure that you get it. And then also I'll click over to our tab. You also have this note sheet. So the first slide is matching this note section, and I've already done it for you. So starting at the top here, in 1929, the stock market crashes and thus triggers the Great Depression. And so with that, I just wanted you to be able to see the flow chart of how that turn of events occurred. So I'll flip back over to our slideshow here. So we start with stock prices. They start rising, which is a good thing for investors because it means that they are making more money, but bad things for people that want to get into the market because they're going to be more expensive. Since the prices are rising, people start over investing. They're putting a lot of money into the stock market thinking that it's doing really well, so their investments are going to be successful. The more money that you put in means the more money that you may get out of it because of your smart investments. But to everyone's surprise, all of a sudden stock prices start falling. And because of that, on the historic Black Tuesday, the investors don't want to lose a lot of money as the prices are falling, so they decide to sell their stock to other people. So instead of just letting it go, they want to make some kind of profit off of it, so they try to sell this stock. But the stock ends up becoming worthless. So these shares, these stocks, shares, same thing, they become worthless. And since now there is not a whole lot of money flowing through the economy, the stock market crashes and thus sends us into this economic depression that struck our entire nation, both politically, economically, and socially as well, like we previously learned. So I just wanted to put that in the forefront of your mind. And like I said, this is already completed for you in your notes, but it's a really great visual to have to look back to as we talk about World War II today. So with that, I want us to look at the political, economic, and social impacts of the Great Depression one more time. So this is really more of a quick overview. If you notice in your note sheet, you have fill in the blanks there, and I'll click over. This is what you're going to use to complete that. So politically, thinking about the government, FDR was the president during the crash, or not the crash, I'm sorry, the programs after the Great Depression. And so he created things like the New Deal, which provided a lot of relief. Basically, people that couldn't work or didn't have jobs, it gave them something to make money for. So you have the Civil Conservation Corps, the Public Works Administration, and the Works Progress Administration. Now, economically, despite the obvious with money of there is not a whole lot of money to go around, the agriculture also suffers. There's not enough to go around to adequately supply to make crops grow. And in that too, there's oil increase. So if you remember, we've talked about Spindletop in 1901, oil was struck outside of Beaumont, Texas. So though the economy in the United States as a whole is not doing so well, Texas is still able to be a little bit more sustainable because of the discovery of oil. Lastly, with the Great Depression is the social, cultural, people component. Many Texans actually migrate to California. And this is also the time period that the Social Security system is established, which basically was a supplement to incomes for people that were unemployed. Also, we talked about the Dust Bowl and how the Dust Bowl compounding with the Great Depression was very devastating for many poor people because now all of a sudden their rural farmlands no longer are sustainable. They cannot grow crops. All right, so if you need to pause this, totally do that and complete those fill in the blank notes, and then we'll get going. All right, so we're going to switch gears to World War II. So yesterday, you should have completed the web quest, which I know had a lot of information. However, gives you really great details and good insight into what World War II was. Some of you may be World War II buffs, and that's awesome. But just for the nature of what we're going to be talking about, I wanted you just to have a pretty good understanding of World War II, and then we're going to zoom in specifically on how it impacted Texas. So If you notice on your notes, you have a graphic organizer, really a three section chart that has the political, the economic, and the social impacts of Texas. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started here. So World War II, originally, the United States was not going to participate in World War II. They decided to take a neutral stance. However, on December 7th, 1941, one of our naval bases in Oahu, Hawaii, called Pearl Harbor, is bombed by the Japanese. And once this happens, it essentially was a very calculated attack by the Japanese in order to force the United States into World War II because of this neutral statement. Many people felt like, or really many countries felt like, the United States needed to join because of the stance of in the world that the United States had, but they still maintained their neutrality until Pearl Harbor. And with that, the United States is forced into World War II. The next day, on December 8th, 1941, FDR, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, gives his infamy speech with his famous line, "A day that will live in infamy," and declares officially war on Japan and throwing the United States into World War II. Now, with that, with Pearl Harbor and the War Declaration in your chart, as we go over the information today about World War II and specifically its impacts in Texas, I want you to be thinking about, would this information be economic, so something to do with money, social, something to do with people and the culture, or political, something to do with the government? Now, some of these things could go in multiple boxes, and feel free to put them in as many boxes as you see fit. Some of them may just be one. So with that, I want you to think as we go through each of these slides today, which component it would fit under, and how would you know that, just to make sure that you are putting it in the correct place. So I'll do this one with you. So Pearl Harbor and the War Declaration are kind of one and the same event, because Pearl Harbor bombing is what causes us to join into World War II. So with that, really it would be all three of these. So you can put the War Declaration in all three of these. It's economic, it deals with money, because to be into combat and deploy soldiers is going to cost a lot of money. You'll need supplies, you'll need transportation. It is also social. It affects our people, because now we have men going to war, and similar to World War I, that's going to leave many women and children behind to fill in the gaps there. And then it is also political, hence, the president is giving the declaration of war, but then also is going to basically make us choose a side. During World War II, as you learned in the web quest, there were the Axis powers and the Allied powers. And since Japan has bombed us, we now join the Allied powers, which adds a political alliance that we are joining. All right, so as we keep going, again, remember to keep asking yourself, is this an economic, political, or social impact? Now, with that, specifically in Texas, during World War II, Texas has a lot of military bases that become extremely important. From legitimate military bases like we see today, I know San Antonio is known as the military city, where we actually have soldiers living there, acting out a variety of different drills and information and such. But we also had what were called internment camps and prisoner of war camps in Texas as well, in support of the war effort. So with that, think about it and write it down. Would having these military bases and internment camps, would that be an economic, social, or political, or a combination of the three? Would it be any of those impacts? All right, so with that, we already talked about how the Great Depression was extremely devastating to Texas's economy. And then shortly after, we enter into a huge war. Now, with that, almost every community looked for a way to get government funded. People were in need of assistance. And so with that, they were trying to do anything they could to help the economy improve. Now, with that, many of our young men, so the very suitable laborers, the workers, were drafted into the military. So there weren't a whole lot of people left for work. And specifically in Texas, though we do have an oil industry, we still are making the majority of our money with farming, with agriculture. So, in an effort to try to improve the economy, we start using these prisoners of war in these camps in Texas as farm workers. So they start working the lands. So with that, you can see some statistics here. And again, be thinking, is this economic, social, or political? And be sure you write it down in your chart. But you can see Texas here for World War II, the military installations. So any blue dot that you see are going to be airfields. Any green dot you're going to see are Army forts and camps. So think like military bases for the Army. Any red dot that you see are prisoner of war camps. So this would be enemies per se of the Axis powers that were caught, and then they're put in these prisoner of war camps. And then anything yellow that you see are going to be naval installments, which if you notice, a lot of them are near bodies of water, hence why it is a Navy establishment. So with that, would all of these, the combination of these military installations, be economic, social, or political? So again, be sure to pause. You can pause this video and write down in your chart where you believe this fits. All right, so internment camps, if you're not familiar with that term, is the state of being confined as a prisoner, especially for political and military reasons. Now, during this time period, because in part people were afraid, but also in part just out of safety precautions, anybody that was seen as potentially an enemy was put into an internment camp. So for those of you that know me, know that I'm half Japanese, and during this time period, Japanese people were seen as somebody to be hesitant to trust. And so I actually have some relatives that were in internment camps in California, but essentially these were people that are technically prisoners, but are kept as prisoner in these camps to be sure that we are protected politically and by military. And with that, here's another map. So a POW camp, the prisoner of war camps, you can see there are quite a few all throughout Texas, most of them being more central in South Texas in the Gulf Coastal Plains and in North Central Plains. Now, before we conclude here, again, just as a reminder, be sure that you are pausing and writing down in your chart the economic, political, and social impacts of World War II in Texas. Now, to finish us off, these pictures are pretty interesting. So the right-hand picture may be familiar to you because they are pictures of an internment camp and a POW camp. The structures of them were very similar. And then on the left-hand side, you can see that these are actually prisoners of war, soldiers really, that are farming. So your questions here, why would soldiers be picking squash? And why are there fences and guard towers around these military barracks? But again, remember, it's more than meets the eye. These are actually soldiers that are prisoners of war. We are putting them into labor so that we could boost our economy. So these are Italian POWs. And then because of the circumstance that they are of the enemy, essentially, there was maximum security around their military barracks. So again, as we conclude, please be sure that you are writing down the answer to those questions there, and also you have completed your ESP chart, the economic, social, and political impacts of World War II. If you need to go back or replay this for any reason, please feel free to do so. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, please email me at jana.clements@boerneisd.net. And feel free to also email your 7th grade Texas history teacher for any other questions or information. Happy learning!